recovery is so long, even though that commitment of money, first you had all the difficulties now in this economy of actually getting that money from federal and state sources out to people. The Road Home program, which is the housing assistance program in New Orleans, took years to get together, so people weren't even getting their grant for almost 3 years after the storm. So if you'd gotten insurance right after, you had your little insurance money perhaps, you still weren't in your house, things happen, medical crises, educational programs, you're trying to, so that, it's not like everybody is saving that nest egg until the federal government gives them, through the states, once again, gives them their road home money. And then the subprime crisis meant for a lot of people who are lower income trying to come up with what it would take to rebuild a new house at $125,000, $130,000. You might have what you'd gotten for the value of your house left, you'd have your road home money, you'd still be up to $30,000, $35,000 short without a subprime market, because the credit worthiness of lower income working families is not pristine, frankly. These are not bond dealers. These are, you know, working people in the service economy, which dominates a hospitality-driven industry that is New Orleans. There was no place to get that gap money. So the whole housing crisis just compelled that even farther. And one of the ironic things about listening to the Springfield problem is that where we were able to get forbearance on all foreclosures and get forbearance on even paying any of the mortgage payments for almost a year after the storm, those things that are available and can be won weren't really pursued in Springfield. And when I had conversations with Laura and Joe and others, and I kept saying, well, these are, you know, the top checklist has to be, you know, don't lose the homes that you've got, get people as close as possible to the homes so they can get back there and they can work on their homes to rebuild it from a short distance as opposed to a long distance. Because this is one of the problems in almost all these disasters. I never thought I'd become starting here as a welfare rights organizer in Springfield. If you'd ever asked me if 40-odd years later I'd become an expert in disasters, I would say, oh, well, I don't think so. But, you know, you play the hands you're dealt, and in this case, even in Kobe, Japan, where they did exactly what you would have wanted, they did the money first, they rebuilt, because you relocated people who were elderly and lower income, you still are not going to get those same, and they recovered their population within 13 years. So these are not short periods of time, whether it's Springfield or New Orleans. You're talking about more than a decade easily before you'll get to the status where you were. You're still not going to get most of those lower income families back. You know, in New Orleans, we went out of our way to make sure they wouldn't come back. There's still no real full-service hospital. I mean, once again, your plan argues that the two-lane medical clinics are a model for you. I mean, what a lie. I mean, there are no medical facilities. If you really have health needs, you can't live in New Orleans still. They're just now breaking ground to build a new, what will replace Charity Hospital here at 8 years, and it won't be finished until 2015, which will be 10 full years after Katrina. So, you know, these are educational system. They closed the schools in New Orleans after the storm for the rest of the school year. So if you had small children that were in school and you didn't have housing, what are you going to do? You're going to have to find a job. You're going to have to find a place where your kids can go to school. Next thing you know, you're in Houston, you're in Atlanta, you're in Little Rock, San Antonio, Springfield for all I know, and that makes it harder to come home. So although New Orleans was a much larger scale disaster than Springfield, these same principles seem to be a straight line running through too many of these situations. You can look at Joplin and Birmingham that happened after Springfield. The progress in Joplin is so much faster than Alabama now because Alabama waited on a planning process. Now, I'm not saying planning is bad, but a lot of this is a facade. I mean, if you try to do everything you can to help people rebuild immediately, even admitting that in some cases it's going to be a rough edge dragging, people will come back quickly. If you essentially cordon off until we finish the plan, you're not going to get that population back. They can't come back. They've got to do what all of us, particularly those of us who spent time in the labor movement, know. You got to have a job and you got to have a roof over your head. In New Orleans, we had jobs that we couldn't fill because we still had no roof over people's heads where you could put people into. So I could sort of, you know, march you through, and for those of you who actually come to the Odyssey tonight, I probably will spend some time marching people through exactly what are the lessons of disaster we saw that tend to be, you know, repeated over and over again, almost in lockstep, that really prevent recoveries. But the bottom line is, be careful of people just whitewashing old plans and trying to bring them up as something new because they couldn't get it done before and they think they can take advantage of the crisis. Something without money means nothing. So it doesn't really matter how flowery the revisioning is, or you know, how fake the process was. Without money, it all still ends up to politics. There's no substitute for organizational activity. The only reason we were able to rebuild what we have of the 9th Ward was because all the city council and mayor had to be elected. So it really didn't matter what the planning process was or what the business community was. If we could still deliver the votes, they had to have the votes, and that meant you had to let everybody vote, and that meant everybody had to rebuild. Obviously, the footprint of the disaster was smaller here in Springfield, so that may not have been as cataclysmic an issue, but it really was, you know, we missed in labor, we missed the opportunity of Katrina in terms of rebuilding the labor movement. We'd been up to the point where our labor density was higher than any other place in the South. Our local had won representation of city workers. Avondale Shipyard had been organized. We'd won several hotels in terms of unionization, which had not been the case. But what the Katrina allowed them to do, essentially devastate the labor movement. The largest union had been the teachers. 5,000 teachers were fired. 2,500 of my city workers were fired. I mean, it was just one thing after another, relocations of business. So the public sector went from highly unionized, finally, to totally almost, you know, disunionized. The Avondale is now scheduled to be closed. That would have been a long 30-year campaign to organize and get them under a contract by Avondale Metal Trades Council with the AFL-CIO. But it was one thing after another, so then you had, you know, I represented all the garbage workers, for example. Well, garbage was picked up by the Corps of Engineers for over a year, so all those people are gone. Mm-hmm. I mean, they rebid the contract. I mean, it's sort of one thing after another. There was, you know, an aggressive effort to de-unionize the city in New Orleans, way back to the general strike in the 19th century. It's been, you know, it was a port city, so it was an early unionization city. We were the last state to lose union shop in the South, not until the final contracts in 1978. So this was an opportunity to, you know, settle scores, and I don't know enough about the Springfield story, so I'm hoping I don't have to hear that story, but this is how people use disasters, and it's not pretty. The big project that they tout in your Springfield plan is Brad Pitt's Make It Right project. This is an architectural aficionado exercise. These are houses that cost an average of $350,000 to build in the lower 9th Ward, which was lower income working families, African American area, about 99%. House value maybe was $40,000 to $50,000. Many of the houses were built by their parents, grandparents, and now all of a sudden you have these, you know, star architectural things. Now they claim in your Springfield plan that these are affordable and are, you know, they're capped on the price. Yeah, I mean, you can buy them for $140,000, $150,000, but these things don't look like they belong anywhere this side of space. I mean, these are giant monstrosities that are, you know, would look great in, I don't know, LA or someplace. But to say that they are part of the vernacular of New Orleans architectural construction, I mean, we have people who come down and tour those homes. And
I have, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, why wouldn't you? Hell, you might see Angelina someday. So, I mean, it's worth a trip. But it's not how you rebuild the lower 9th Ward, and it is not part of the, I mean, so it's actually an insult to the lower 9th Ward. It's how you take advantage of a low-income community and colonize it with, you know, and